Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all for coming. Welcome. We are recording, so just bear that in mind. The minutes from this, and which are just kind of notes and links to the things discussed, and also the recording are obviously available online in the joint Just Transition Network link. We'll just briefly do a quick round of intros and then go straight into our couple of presenters pieces today. So if I just say hi, so I'm Sam Perry, as you should all know, I think, Green Bargaining Project Officer at Yorkshire Lumber TUC. And if we just go around in the order that I see on my screen, so Debbie, just a super brief name and where you're from.
I'm Debbie Cobbett and I'm UCU Retired Members Branch Green Rep for Yorkshire and Humber.
Thanks, Debbie. And then we got Leanne.
Hello, Leanne Vickers, a project manager in Leeds City Council and also the Green Rep for Unite Union.
Lovely, thanks for being here. Catherine.
An active member of Wakefield NEU and has an graduates group, and Wakefield Trades Council, which has Just Transition Wakefield.
Lovely. Ellen is next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Leeds and Wakefield Unite Community, and York as well, and also Leeds Trades Council.
Lovely. Martin.
Hi, I'm Martin Morley. I'm from PCS, and I've kind of got a range of responsibilities that I support sort of in the green space.
Thanks a lot. Dave.
Yeah, Dave Merritt, TSSA, Northeastern General Branch, and the York and District Trades Union Council liaison officer. Also a local councillor in York.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then we've got Ali and Merry, who some of you may know one or either of them already. I will go. They're both our guests today, so we'll hear from them now. We'll go to Ali first. So Ali Warrington is from Possible, which is this charity that you've probably all heard of that provides tools and grassroots campaigning pieces to inspire people around climate change. I thought it would be valuable to hear from Ali just because the work that they're doing is really important, and I think it's something that our branches can support and potentially have resources that we can learn from and take into workplaces and elsewhere. So I'll just pass straight over to you, if that's right, Ali.
Hi, yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Sam. Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Ali, and I'm head of aviation, heat and energy work at Possible. Shall I just go straight into the presentation, Sam? Okay, fantastic. Is it okay if I share some slides?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. I think you should have permission.
Thanks. Is that working for everyone?
Not yet.
Yeah, no, not yet.
How about now? Is that working?
Yes, I think it's just loading. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, so fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much, Sam, for having me along today. So yeah, I'll do a sort of quick overview of some of the areas that we're working on, and then hopefully we can have a bit more of a sort of like discussion, because yeah, it'd be really great to get people's thoughts on this as well, and like your insights and perspectives on sort of like what's working, what isn't working. So yeah, Possible is a charity that works on climate solutions. So we do work around clean heat, clean energy, clean transport, and more sustainable consumption. And for us, it's really key that climate solutions have to improve people's lives. So obviously a really, really key part of that is that climate action has to cut costs for people. It's just completely not viable to tell anybody that, you know, that they need to pay more, particularly after the cost of living crisis, but also things like ways to improve people's work-life balance, making people's journeys, like their commutes better, or their holiday journeys better, or their living sorry, their living environments better, or keeping homes warmer. And we work on climate solutions at different levels, so sort of individual level, community level. We also have one project that's at workplace level, which I'll talk a bit more about. We do sort of different types of engagement on climate. So we do political engagement, research, policy solutions, press work, develop community projects, and also create actions that our supporters can do. So yeah, Possible's sort of work is quite focused on behaviour change, so it's things that people can do, but obviously the structural changes needed to tackle the climate crisis are very, very linked to that, because people at an individual or household or workplace or community level can't make you know, low carbon choices without the right sort of architecture to be in place for that, whether it's, you know, making clean energy cheaper or clean heat cheaper, or making low carbon travel more affordable or more accessible. Yeah, so we work across different areas of the transition where ordinary people can have an impact, and a just transition is really sort of baked into our work, that we really want to focus on designing solutions that work for people who are you know, either excluded or potentially excluded from essentially access to resources that they need. So whether that's people living in energy poverty, people who can't afford to travel, people living without access to green spaces, people who don't have access to low carbon transport. So the different areas that we work on, so sort of day-to-day travel, holiday travel, warm, affordable, warm homes that people can afford to keep warm, and also the consumption angle, so around what people buy on a daily basis. So I'm going to talk in a bit more detail now about some of the projects that Possible runs to try and like put that theory into action. So this is the Fixing Factory, and this is a community hub where people can bring broken electrical goods that they would usually throw away, so things like, you know, toasters, hair dryers, but they're just, you know, they're designed to be replaced when they break rather than repaired, which obviously causes a huge amount more emissions, also cost people more money if they have to buy new things. And as well as providing fixing services, the Fixing Factory is also a sort of community hub that teaches people how to repair things. So it's sort of engaged in that kind of training angle as well. And these are some of the events that it runs, so workshops, training, community events. And we also have a campaign for a parklet, which is essentially a small pop-up park that takes place on the street in a place where usually a car would park. Obviously, you know, car dominance causes a lot of problems, has a lot of an impact on air pollution and congestion, and making our streets less pleasant, less safe. And of course, there's also the problem that in a lot of places, particularly outside major cities, public transport just is hard to access. It doesn't exist, or it's too expensive. And so, yeah, we've created some green spaces in different areas, which are kind of like community resources. And then, yeah, then the next project I wanted to cover is climate perks, which might be of particular interest to people here because it's a workplace focused scheme. So essentially, this is a scheme that employers can sign up to give their staff additional days of paid leave each year so they can travel without flying when they go on holiday. So employers sign up to do this, and then they offer it to their employees as a kind of perk. And obviously, we're always, you know, very keen to have new employers signed up to climate perks. So if you think that this is something that like your organisation or your workplace might be interested in, like please do get in touch. And yeah, this is some of the work that we do on heat and energy. And obviously for people's energy bills, a really, really key thing is cost. And for renewable electricity, it's quite easy to make the argument that renewable energy is cheaper than gas-powered electricity, particularly after the energy cost crisis. Heat is more difficult because the cost ratio between gas and electricity means that it's not always cheaper for people to have a heat pump. And of course, there's also initial startups as well. So we were modelling a kind of new design for community energy project, which link up wind energy with the electricity needed to power heat pumps, to find that actually this is a way of making people's energy bills lower. And we're currently trying to design some projects to put that into practice, which would be really exciting. And then, yeah, the kind of like more national policy level, we campaign against private jets, that kind of angle around like this very excessive luxury emissions. It's just really grotesque. It's very, very unequal. And of course, the kind of people who can afford to take a private jet really should be paying a lot more tax. You might have seen in the recent budget, the Chancellor did put a small increase on the tax rates on private jets. I would argue that this rate is actually way too small. It was a 50% increase, and as you might have seen, bus fares also went up by 50%. And for both some of the poorest people who rely on buses for essential travel and the wealthiest people in society with the highest emissions to both get a 50% increase didn't seem massively fair, but at least it was a step in the right direction. And then, yeah, this is the Clean Cars for Carers project, which is essentially looking at rural care workers who have to drive to do their jobs, are paid very poorly for the incredibly important and essential work that they do, often have very high fuel costs. And this was exploring a model of essentially social leasing for care workers to be able to use electric cars to cut the amount that they were spending on fuel. So yeah, sort of really focusing on like access to essential transport for people who really need it. Yeah, cool. I think that's everything. But yeah, really interested to get any like thoughts or feedback from people. If anybody would like to discuss any of that in more detail, please let me know, because yeah, we'd be really happy to.
Thanks so much, Ali. That's a whole host of things. Excellent projects that I'm sure. I mean, I saw nodding going around the virtual room there on a number of those things. And bits that I think we could definitely take to individual workplaces, and also, that kind of broader community activism and networking as well. I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. Ellen, you're first off the mark there. Go on.
Yes, because I was particularly interested in what you were saying about clean travel for care workers, but also that it's absolutely not just rural, because care workers, domiciliary care workers spend far more time on the road wherever they're located than they do actually with their service users. So, it's a massive issue, isn't it, both for the service users and for for the workers themselves. I've had experience of this where workers that have had to come maybe 4 times to the same address in a day, but then also 4 times to an address at the other side of the city. So they're spending more their day sitting in a traffic jam, which is, so there's obviously more to it than just replacing their ICE vehicle with an electric vehicle. It's certainly a really, really key area to be looking at from all sorts of different angles. It's one of those areas where different interest groups have a common interest and in getting that better. I mean, I would say, can we even kind of integrate that with a campaign around having a national care service instead of all these bonkers, different little agencies all over the place that mean that family carers have to spend their life running around trying to find, trying to get cover. Yeah, there's a lot of potential there. It sounds great, but yeah, can we link it up with maybe other things that are connected with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like completely agree. Like it's not, like a kind of instant cure all for like all the problems affecting care workers, like you say, including like privatization, the low wages, the kind of general like lack of, as you say, like a public service and recognition of how like completely vital their work is. I think we worked with the Care Workers charity on this project because we really wanted it to like be designed in a way that actually like worked for, you know, people who are using it.
Thanks. We'll go to Catherine.
Yeah, I thought the care one is really exciting, isn't it? I'm aware of a Stockton charity that does. They did have got a fleet of electric bikes, and we're trying to persuade people to get electric cars. So 5 lamps in Stockton. Not all of them have signed up for it, but it is a project that's trying to get that sort of social responsibility and climate action going there. So I think it's trying to make sure that we could make that a workplace demand, couldn't we? If we were where we're actually organising. So I'm thinking we must go back to the unison branches, but we did lose a load. So we did have unison branches that were very, very key organisers, and we now need to talk to the JMB and other unions because they went for single recognition agreements, and so we haven't got those. But I'm at NEU, so I don't organise in that bit. But we do need that sort of conversation. I'm also fascinated with the climate perks thing, and that's a demand that we identified. And I think we added that on to a set. I think Unison in the hospitals added that on because they've got a whole load of sustainability agenda there. So I think they added it onto their demands. But everything is so stretched, you know, pre-pandemic. But post-pandemic, everything's so very, very stretched. But I think that's something that I would love to be able to do. Of course, my actual union is the NEU, which is we're bound by school holidays, and I know that teachers are desperate for their holidays, and so they're some of the keenest to get away on as fast as possible to as warm away, and I sort of go, oh please, you know, please, a lovely caravan holiday in wherever would be lovely, but they don't really want to go with that one. But the climate perks, I think, if we could add that onto something. There was 1 or 2 academies that did allow people to fly earlier so that they could take advantage of the flights. If you could, so I'm not saying it's impossible for education. I'm just saying it might be a possibility of a demand that if you were going to be travelling by train to your destination, you could start earlier or whatever. But other people could be going with that one in a bigger way, I'm sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's really interesting. Like in terms of the care worker stuff, I think obviously we'd be very, very like keen to work with unions representing care workers. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm not sure if my colleague who leads on that project has already done that, but yeah, if anyone's interested in picking that up with us, that would be really, really fantastic. And yeah, the same with perks actually. Maybe if I put my email address in the chat, and then if anyone's up for like having a further conversation about that, that would be really, really fantastic.
That'd be brilliant if you wouldn't mind, Ali. I'll circulate it to the wider group after this as well, along with a link to the website, but potentially, I mean, the resources are already there actually, aren't they, for at least climate perks I've seen online. So maybe people can find their own way there. I think there's a lot of this. It's I think once we kind of, and increasingly we're finding within the kind of green trade unionism space, everything's always bigger than a workplace. I mean, this is always true. But so we're already kind of developing these community and workplace links and this kind of, you know, bigger picture piece. And so I think it kind of brings nicely together some of these aspects of what we're doing, and some of these your campaigns pick that up brilliantly, which is great. It also speaks to that we have these trades council things which everyone will know, and so, you know, we can sort of we can take this at that kind of level. It's interesting what is possible and what's where the limitations are. I mean, yeah, in education where you've got kind of fixed hours, fixed days, then potentially climate perks as it's currently designed maybe isn't perfect. But then if we were to, there's a kind of at the moment, maybe that argument can't be made, but if we were in a position where we're asking all schools to do full scope 3 kind of assessments on their emissions, well, then the case makes it, you know, it makes the case very easy because you realize that you're actually kind of responsible for what your staff are doing.
Good point. Yeah.
And so you kind of quickly kind of, you know, solve those problems. It's all brilliant, brilliant stuff. I'll come back to you, Ali.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think, about education. And I think we're sort of at very early stages of exploring is because obviously another barrier to low carbon travel for people is that it can be more expensive to get the Eurostar. And we're thinking of trying to start exploring a model where employers would also support staff who use climate perks with the additional cost of flight-free travel. But I think that was something that would be a lot more difficult to do in a public sector workplace compared to a private company, just because obviously money is so tight across the private sector. But potentially for like some commercial companies, that could also be an additional thing to implement.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, it's geared towards obviously recreational travel, but there is also a lot of travel that goes on as part of people's jobs, and so that whole slow travel piece, you know, speaks to the same things, doesn't it? It's not time off, but you know, provision where that's possible. It's a lot easier to work on a train if you are, you know, you're an employer asking people to do that than it is waiting in an airport and then flying. On the care workers thing, there is this is something the TC in a broader way is trying to engage more with. I know a lot of our unions are wanting to work closer with care workers. It's often really terrible work in terms of terms and conditions, and you know all the stuff we already know, and so any additional weapons in our arsenal to make it appealing for them to work with trade unions, things like this are very welcome, and I'm sure we can support that. Were there any other thoughts, comments, questions at this time? No, okay, well that's fine. Thank you very much, Ali, for being here. I will share your email as well, so people can get in touch afterwards. You're welcome to stay, but you also you don't have to. I think you said that you may not be able to stay that long anyway. So
yeah, I've got another call at 1, but I'd love to stay on until then if that's okay. Okay,
fantastic. Thanks for staying. Okay, well that's brilliant. Let's move straight on to our second guest to this today, which is Merry Dickinson, who is joining us from Stop Burning Trees Coalition. Some of you will know her already. We'll just dive straight into it, shall we, Mary?
Sweet, yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me here, Sam. Yeah, I'm going to be sharing some slides as well, if that's okay. But as Sam said, I'm Merry from the Stop Burning Trees Coalition, and I'm going to just sort of, hopefully, you'll all be able to see that. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Oh, sorry, I realised I
out
couldn't
of present room now, but yeah.
And now, okay,
yeah,
cool,
perfect.
So I guess the way I'm going to kind of do this is sort of talk about who the Stop Burning Trees Coalition are, and then going into sort of the work that we're doing, some of the issues that we see with Drax. I know there's some people here that know as much or far more than I do about Drax, but just to hopefully get us all to like a similar level of knowledge, and then around the specific work we're doing around a just transition. So the Stop Burning Trees Coalition is a grassroots coalition primarily made up of groups across Yorkshire and the Humber and the North more broadly, and then sort of a few others spread around the country. We came together about 2.5-ish years ago of primarily groups in Yorkshire and the Humber thinking about the fact that we've got Drax on our doorstep and wanting to do something about that. And so we kind of have a few different strands of work that we engage in, which ranges from the more grassroots side of political engagement, whether that's people meeting with their MPs or their councillors or decision makers, sort of showing the broad spread of public opposition to Drax, but from a very grassroots level. And then kind of the outreach and challenging greenwashing aspect of it, which I'll maybe talk a bit more about as we get into the issues with Drax, but trying to just raise a lot of awareness in this region and more broadly across the UK of what's going on with Drax, the issues with the woody biomass industry, and hopefully alternatives. And then finally, the just transition aspect of our work, which I'm going to get into in a lot more detail, but just sort of to preface it is whilst obviously the campaign or coalition is called Stop Burning Trees Coalition, we are fundamentally opposed to what's happening at Drax and Linemouth, another wood biomass power station. We very much recognise that moving away from these polluting industries cannot be coming at the cost of workers, and there needs to be a much more broad spread transition away from these polluting industries, from greenwashed climate solutions to the future that we all actually need, want and deserve. So I'm just going to talk quite briefly around what's wrong with Drax. Apologies if a lot of you already know this, but maybe it's helpful to have a recap. The way the Drax works, which is a power station in Selby, just down the road from where I live in York, their business model, they used to be a coal power station and then they transferred to burning woody biomass, so like wood pellets. These wood pellets are made from trees or forest residues, sawmill residues, often from whole trees, and we source them all from abroad. So they're turned into pellets abroad, shipped over here, and then burnt in Drax power stations. And there's been a lot of investigations, a lot of research that shows that where Drax is sourcing from are really, really vital forests, from primary forests, from old growth forests in British Columbia, from biodiverse hotspots in the southern US, and across Estonia and Latvia as well. And so this pellet production, turning these trees or offcuts into these little wood pellets, emits really, really dangerous pollutants and is particularly impacting communities of colour, poorer communities in the southern US in particular, from the air pollution that comes from turning these trees into wood pellets, which leaves whole communities unable to breathe, relying on machinery to survive, all in the name of green energy for the UK. Which, if we're doing all of this, you'd hope it would be actually green energy. It's really not. Drax is the UK's single largest carbon emitter. Burning woody biomass actually emits more carbon per unit of energy generated than coal. So we're taking these forests, these vital carbon sinks from abroad, shipping them over here and burning them, and yet we're still emitting huge amounts of pollution. But because of the way that woody biomass is counted under international and national carbon accounting rules, Drax is eligible for renewable energy subsidies, some of which are coming out of our energy bills. And so for the last several years, Drax has been receiving nearly 2 million per day in subsidies. They've had an estimated, I think, 7 billion in green subsidies so far, and are looking to continue getting more and more subsidies to continue doing this. There's been various scandals of Drax effectively gaming the subsidy system to avoid paying back any subsidies that it would have to when energy bills rose, and just taking as much advantage as possible of sky-high energy bills in this country to line their shareholders' profits, whilst also causing huge amounts of pollution and harm to communities abroad and here in the UK. And so then, sort of looking at what is going on with Drax at the moment, is what they're promising to do is build bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which is, you may all be familiar with carbon capture and storage already. The idea is fitting technology which will then capture these emissions and go underground in a pipeline to be stored in the North Sea underground. But the issue with this, beyond just the general issues we've seen with carbon capture and storage after the last few decades of repeated failures, huge costs to the public, and various issues around pipelines leaking, that sort of thing, is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage for woody biomass just doesn't exist at scale. To make it happen, and the subsidies that would be required, they're estimated to cost the public £41 billion, which is a huge amount of money that could be being used for other things. And there's been recent studies that show that it would actually do nothing to help the UK achieve net zero by 2050. But it doesn't mean, unfortunately, BECCS continues to feature very heavily in UK climate plans, pathways to net zero, because the idea is that if you capture these emissions and it's already counted as zero carbon, then you can generate negative emissions, which would allow the offsetting of other harder to decarbonise sectors, fossil fuel sector, and so on. And so this is the sort of promise that Drax is selling, but the reality is the science, all of it, none of it actually adds up in practice. And so now Drax is currently asking the government for more subsidies, both to continue their existing subsidies from 2027 when they're due to expire, and then for future subsidies to fund the building of bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And so a lot of our work as a coalition is campaigning against these subsidies and calling for them to be redirected. And obviously there's a lot of better uses that could be done with these subsidies, based on some very and we're not saying this is exactly what these subsidies should be used for, but to sort of put it into perspective, Drax's subsidies last year could have funded the retrofitting of 208,000 homes across Yorkshire and the Humber. It could have funded training for up to nearly 22,000 young people over 5 years. It could be funding 10,000 new bus drivers across Yorkshire and the Humber, with an equal amount invested in bus priority and road safety. These are just a couple of examples. There are so many other things that could be done instead of using our energy bills, using green subsidies to fund shareholder profits in Drax for a company that is doing actually nothing to help us decarbonise. So I guess this brings me on to the work that we're currently doing at the moment as a coalition. Some of you are very aware of this, some of you have worked in this project, but recently the coalition published a report called Beyond Drax, A Real Green Future for Yorkshire and the Humber. Because the other thing with Drax's BECCS plans and the fact that Drax is a big employer in the north, in Yorkshire, and a lot of the ways that they're selling BECCS is that they will be bringing 10,000 green jobs to Yorkshire and the Humber. Unfortunately, when you drill down into those figures, it's actually about 375 long-term jobs. They're pulling on indirect and induced jobs to effectively inflate those figures and presenting themselves as key to bringing green jobs to this region. And there is one thing we agree on. We do need green jobs in Yorkshire and the Humber. We need them across the whole of the UK. But those jobs need to be in genuine renewable energy and genuine climate solutions that actually improve people's lives and aren't just false solutions being sold to us by polluters who want to continue polluting. And so as a coalition, we do, obviously we're calling for an end to subsidies, for an end to what Drax is doing, but that cannot be at the expense of workers or communities who are relying on those jobs. And so we sort of undertook a project to look at the real green jobs that are needed in Yorkshire and the Humber. So I'm going to very, very briefly speak through that and then get into sort of, please read the whole report or shortened versions. But just a sort of summary of the areas we looked into in terms of the jobs that we included in our final count is we set out different visions for the different foundational industries required to do this actual transition. So renewable energy, buildings and heat, transport, reuse and recycling of waste, and food and farming. And then we also had a brief look at the sort of other alternative green jobs that aren't so direct and foundational, like health and social care and the vacancies that exist there, and also the need for trainings and skills. But what we found is there's actually a huge potential for green jobs in Yorkshire and the Humber, and a huge need as well to actually decarbonise them. And these are all direct jobs. They don't include supply chains or anything like that, because we wanted all the induced jobs, indirect jobs that would come from having more economic activity in an area. So these are all just the very much direct necessary jobs. The actual figures of green jobs needed will be far larger than this. But what we found is there's over 70,000 direct green jobs needed over the next 10 years to decarbonise Yorkshire and the Humber. And this is the minimum, as I said, that we consider to be needed. But, and I'm speeding through this, but I guess the key point that I want to state here, before we go into questions and discussion, is that to make these jobs a reality, whether that's in renewable energy, in onshore wind and solar, whether it's in retrofitting houses, bringing in heat pumps, whether it's in changing our food systems to be more localized with more urban production of food, more agroecological production of food, whether it's in better buses, changing our public transport system to work for people and stopping the ever increasing prices. There needs to be a really unified campaign to make this happen. To make all of these jobs happen, we need an approach that recognises the interconnected nature of our society, that aligns all of these different campaigns together, that's not just going beyond Drax which is a core part of what the work we're doing, but also recognizing how all of these different sectors are interconnected. And so we're now kind of moving into the next stage of after publishing this report, and we're still continuing with our political and grassroots outreach and advocacy, but also what we want to be doing right now, which is why it's really great to be here today, is linking up with different community groups, trade unions, trade TUC branches, everyone everywhere that we can across Yorkshire and the Humber to start making the work to make these jobs a reality happen, to look at all the things that will be needed, whether that's training, skills, different political decisions from political decision makers across Yorkshire and the Humber and the UK to make this a reality. So I guess I'm really keen to hear from everyone here on how you think this can be made a reality. Any questions you have, I'll put the links to these in the chat. Yeah, I'll stop talking now.
That's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Mary. It's an enormous subject, and you condensed it down quite nicely into quite a concise presentation, which is commendable in itself, actually. But it's obviously a really interesting issue, and that jobs report with those thousands of job potential is obviously something that as trade unionists especially, but as citizens of the world who want, good things for those around us, is obviously quite intriguing. So I will open it up to comments, questions, thoughts. I'll come to Ellen first.
I just wanted to add one thing because it was connected to the what we've just talked about earlier on in the meeting, which is some of the jobs that we didn't quantify as climate jobs as such were the jobs in health and care, and it's horrifying. There are well over 12,000 vacancies in adult social care in Yorkshire and Humber. No prizes for guessing why that is, but it's an essential part of a just transition, isn't it, to actually have have better wages and conditions for those workers, so that it actually becomes a viable sector to work in. Because quite apart from all the things we've already talked about, that the detriment to service users and workers themselves, but when I'm just thinking about, actually, don't think she's here today, but Jo Cutter's work on the survey of what people would like to do if they weren't doing, if they moved out of a high emission sector. And really high up on that list was literally was care work, and another one was land work. But they're not viable for most people. You can't. Oh, you are here, Jo. Sorry about that. Yeah, you can't get a livable wage. Most people can't get a livable income from that kind of work. So it really is intrinsic to the idea of a just transition, and it supports what Merry was saying about the importance of a really an integrated cross-sector planning and demand. And I would like to just on that point, the Energy Campaign Strategy Day that we had last Saturday, the key thing that came out of most of the breakout discussions was we need a plan, and the government's not going to give us that plan. And unfortunately, most of the unions have been rather slow on this, although there are developments happening now. But if the plan isn't there, we need to start making it ourselves, and we need to start reaching out to each other and coming together to sort of work out what the makings of that plan need to be.
Thanks, Ellen. That's very true. Did you want to respond to that, Mary? Or
yeah, I mean, I would just very much echo what Ellen said. I sped through sort of the results of that report, but 100%, I think one of the really key takeaways is how interconnected each of these sectors are, and therefore, if we want to be realistic about bringing 70,000 plus green jobs to Yorkshire and the Humber, it's going to take a lot of work of all of us from our various campaign sectors doing it together, and whether that's fighting for better rights for land workers, working with unions like SALT, or whether it's campaigning for better pay for carers, better work terms and conditions. It's all very, very much inherently interconnected. So yeah, thank you for raising that, Helen, I guess.
Thanks. We'll go to Martin.
Just very quickly for me, thanks for the presentation. It was really informative, actually, of something that I hadn't been quite aware of. So it's good to sort of pick up something new. I just, from my perspective, it might be worth just, if I could get your contact details, I might be able to share you some contacts that I have who do briefings for government. So that might be useful.
That would be amazing. I'll put my email in the chat.
I can also circulate round if that's all right, Mary. I think it's a really interesting area because there are sort of two competing narratives in many ways about what net zero or decarbonisation or whatever just transition means. One is that it's about closing a load of places, and so there's a kind of threat to livelihoods and communities, and this is the narrative that the likes of Reform like to push, and I think this piece of work and this focus is really timely and important because it directly counters that. It's the, yes, it needs to close, but actually that's not a problem because there's all this better stuff that could replace it. And then there's the other narrative that we could just grow ourselves out of this, which is partly true. Like the green economy does need to grow, and that would be a good thing, but it needs to grow in a good way. And I think again, this speaks to that same piece about, if we were growing in low carbon industries like care and like farm work, and not in the high carbon industries, the kind of logic of just plugging something onto a dirty factory doesn't really sound very grown up. It sounds like a sort of patching. I mean, literally is a sort of patching over. And so I quite like that it counters both sides of that narrative in a very constructive and kind of grown up way, basically. So I think as trade unionists, we obviously have that influence within individual workplaces, but also as a campaigning body or a series of campaigning bodies, we have that influence over policymakers and the kind of sweep of policy and strategy, in our particular sectors. So I think it's definitely something that we can do. I will circulate links to the actual report as well. I mean, you've put your QR code there, but I'll circulate the actual thing so people can see that. Joe, you've got your hand up, so we'll come to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for those two great presentations, really interesting work, and it's really interesting to see how those campaigns connect to the kind of ideas of work and decent work, and really, it's really important that we continue to make those linkages and wherever we can. Just in terms of Ellen, so I'm just reading Ellen's point. There's both that call and there's also another call, if people are not aware, of the industrial strategy. So there has been the launch of the consultation of the industrial strategy, which the deadline is, I should know, but it's fairly short. It is a green paper in essence, and there are a couple of sections on clean energy and the importance of seeing that as a growth, both seeing that as a growth sector and the importance of green infrastructure as a kind of underpinning. So I'd just encourage everybody to, respond to the consultation. If you have thoughts on how to ensure that that we have, as you rightly say, not just growth, and whilst it's a difficult conversation in a union context to not focus on growth. In a sense, our model of existence has been negotiating the sort of share of growth, in a sense, sort of the distribution of wealth that's created through growth, and that's been a sort of a fundamental way of seeing our relationship to sort of the economy for the last 30 odd years. So it's very difficult to counter that narrative, but I mentioned it in a forum recently, and I don't know if this is a complete cop-out, but to talk about responsible business growth. And I know that's could be a complete greenwash and all the other kinds of wash, but just to make the point that it's not just growth at any cost. It has to be, considerate of these issues. So I'll add the link to the industrial strategy consultation if people haven't seen it.
Thanks, Joe. You're right. It closes on Sunday, I think. But there's still time. I'm sure they're going to get more.
Yeah, and you don't have to. There are loads of questions. There are like 30 odd questions. Just focus on the one question that most importantly speaks to your interests, I would say.
There's no, and in that consultation there is no requirement to respond to every aspect. You just speak to your strengths, and so that's fine. I think it's going to get a lot of interest. It's a very interesting paper.
Well, it's good. It's the first time we've had an industrial strategy for quite a while, so it's good to have one. And so you need to be constructive in that sense.
Definitely.
But of countering some of those rather unhelpful narratives, shall we say.
Debbie, we'll go to you.
Okay. A couple of things really about trade union involvement. I've been in loads of Zooms, and one was with the UCU Annual Climate and Environment Committee, and we had a speaker from PCS who works in DEFRA talking about their work as PCS around National Climate and Biodiversity Service. So it seems to me they're a lot better placed than politicians and greenwashers. And the other meeting, also in that one I thought, anyway, yes, from Friends of the Earth Scotland, who did a shed load of work with offshore oil workers. People will know about Platform, I'm sure, but the whole methodology of talking to the workers, not talking about just transition, beginning by talking about what they think of their jobs, and then eventually coming around to, how about shifting to offshore wind or some other kind of work. So just to put in, a plug for considering them rather than, responding to consultations and talking to Drax, who I think the only truth we've heard from them recently was how yummy the money they stand to make from the energy demand for AI developments, the rest of what they said in a meeting Sam and I were at was, let's say, economical with the truth. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Debbie. Mary, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I think wherever possible that we can have trade unions involved in this is excellent. I am a huge fan of the work that was done by Platform and Friends of the Earth Scotland. I think we would, as a coalition, love to do that at some point when we have the resources or the capacity. I think that would be it would be an incredible thing to do. I also know from speaking to people who did that just how much work went into it and the sort of time that was required and the care that was required to do it properly as well. And I think if we were to do something like that, I'd want it to be done very carefully and considerately. I think we have to be talking to workers. We just need to be better at doing that and put more time and energy into doing that. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that's core to any of this happening. It could never and should never be people just coming in and saying, we've got a plan for you and we're going to tell you how it's going to work. That's absurd. So yeah, completely completely agree. I think, yeah, I guess that was my main point. Drax being economical with the truth sounds about right. I'll stop there.
Thanks. I think this is, your hand is still up, Debbie, rather than raised. Yeah, cool. Thank you. I mean, it speaks to, I was going to mention it later, but I'll mention it now because it kind of fits in nicely. The TEC are putting, in collaboration with the unions at Scunthorpe Steelworks at the British Steel plant in Scunthorpe, are putting on a what we're calling a community dinner and discussion on 4th of December in Hull, which it's so the conveners and union folks will be there. People might be aware, will probably be aware of what's happening with British Steel, which is sort of going through this kind of process, or potentially going through this process of greening, how it works, but at the expense of workers. It's the sort of the least just version of this kind of transition to greening steel production. So we and they jointly are hosting this event to try and bring
I think it's frozen.
You're frozen, Sam, you've frozen up.
Was that Athene, by the way, who came to your meeting, Debbie? Was that Athene? Yeah. I work in DEFRA, so yeah, it's I work with Athene and Dan, a few others.
Yeah, my notes are very brief, but I felt we had some really good speakers. It's been the best climate thing I've been at in a long time, so well done. UCU.
Yeah, made a report back that it was a good meeting.
Looks like Sam's back.
good stuff. Yeah, sorry. I was put on hold. I guess my connection was poor. So I was just highlighting that this event is happening on the 4th of December, bringing communities and trade unions together to sort of trying to, kind of bridge this gap in a similar way as is being done at Drax. And so I think those efforts, so I'll let you know how that goes, Mary. We'll see if that's an option for you as well. But I think that kind of piece is just really interesting. This isn't a sector or it's that particular workplace problem. It's an entire community problem, and it's good to have those conversations to start broadening that out. Were there any more comments, questions, thoughts for Mary or Ali while we have them for the last couple of minutes of this bit? Debbie, super
Can they
quick.
come again?
Only suggestions on action points and things like that.
Okay, I mean we'll keep the we've got another half hour, but just conscious that Ali needs to go, and we'll move on.
Can we keep in touch with Ali? Yeah. as a network.
That would be really fantastic. Yeah, I'd really like that. And I think a couple of my colleagues would really, really love to talk to you as well. So yeah, that would be amazing. And yeah, thanks so much. Really brilliant to meet you all. Fantastic.
Thank you so much for being here, Ali. And Mary, you're very welcome to stay, but you don't necessarily have to. So if you do need to get off, then feel free to do that.
I think I do need to chip off and get into another meeting. But thank you so much for having me. And please do drop me an email or anything if you want to do an event around the report, you'd like a physical copy, you'd like to distribute physical copies or leaflets, or just have loads of questions that I may or may not be able to answer. So yeah, please do get in touch. And thank you so much, Sam, for organising this and having me. And I'll chip off.
No, not at all. Thanks so much for joining us and reporting back on that. That's great. I will share all details.
Amazing.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. So I think they were both really interesting contributions, and I think can really help organising in various ways, either as kind of fuel for thought or as kind of specific pieces that we could adopt. We do have an agenda, so I'll just move to the next bit, which is talking about network activities. So we this group spawned a Green Rep Rights working group a few months back, and we've had a bit of a think about what that looks like. So as you'll know, Green Reps don't have statutory rights to organise and gather information, etc., do inspections at the moment. This has been something that the trade union movement has been calling for 30 years, but we're in a position now with a government that seems to be making positive sounding noises in this area that we might be able to push it over the line. The TUC at a national level is potentially being moved in this direction as well, and so if we can so the idea of this working group is to kind of build that body of evidence and action to support that. We kind of kicked off fairly quickly and did a bit of work, but then it has been in sort of hiatus for the last month or so, largely because I've not engaged with it. So I'm sorry to those who were engaged. I've just not had time. Particular thanks to Joe, who provided some great information, and so we've got a good body of evidence that of how Green Reps can influence things. We've got a great list of case studies now, and also to Leanne for putting together a list of MPs that we would want to lobby or work with. So I'm just kind of letting you know that firstly, and secondly, I think there is this potential. So if we I'll try probably in the new year now to put together another meeting of that working group, and then we can kind of get together and think about next steps for that. So if anyone else wants to be involved, those here, but also those potentially watching later, then do let me know. I think there's a lot of good work that could happen here. On that, is there any comments or thoughts?
Just quickie in terms of time frame, because I wasn't sure. Sort of when we first met, there was I don't know whether it was coming up to Congress or if there was a particular time slot that we were trying to hit. What does that mean in terms of where we're currently at in terms of those proposals?
Yeah, so it initially seemed that the opportunity would be early in the Parliament, so it would be part of this New Deal for Working People thing, or whatever they're calling it now. That draft legislation that has been published and doesn't have anything to do with this, but it also doesn't have anything to do with a load of other related trade union stuff. So and having spoken to government, that's fine. That's not that this is more of something they're going to explore over the next 4 years, rather than something that they wanted out the door immediately. So I think actually the immediacy of this is slightly not, it's downplayed. We'll go to mine.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's on our kind of early engagement stuff for PCS around trying to push that across government. So civil service effectively to try and get recognition for Green Reps. So I think I've spoken to you about this before, about trying to get that case study stuff. So if you've got any more additional bits that you can share with me, that'd be really useful, because I think what we want to try and do is sort of build up a case centrally and then give that out to all the departments to start engaging, which obviously will then hit on ministers' desks potentially if we're starting to push and in this space, which might help build the case more broadly for it. So I know I've spoken at kind of some of like PCS's senior, like John Maloney and co, around this, so that they are quite keen on trying to push this, because it's an area of then sort of people can then get time to influence and do what they need to do. So yeah, just let us know what's going on with that meeting. I'll see whether we can get someone along to that.
Thanks, Mike. That's brilliant. I mean, it is worth noting that obviously Green Reps have rights that they've won in individual workplaces throughout the country, which is great. But it's always this battle and it's this barrier. And so, what if it was just easy, right? Like it is with health and safety reps, maybe not easy, but the sort of default there. So yeah, we'll definitely keep you in the loop here.
Examples of that piece where he was talking about the examples of like where it's really positive impact, that'd be really helpful for us building that case.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll go to Catherine, then Joe after.
I'm sort of, I've put it in the chat. The NEU is in Harrogate in April for its annual conference. There is a very enthusiastic and encouraging. We've got a Green Reps network now. It's not huge, but there are a number of people that will manage to get lots of other people to stand on photographs or whatever else, and we can make it part of the demands of things that we put on. We will have an NEU Climate Network stall in Harrogate. I'm telling you all this so that you've got, so we can think about it, how to use that and what the asks are for that sort of opportunity. Because the green, we have an NEU network, so we'll think about it. But I'm giving forewarning that there's an opportunity that we don't want to miss. Really, thank you.
No, that's great. Thanks. Am I off mute? Yes. That's great. Thanks. There are certain unions that are pushing ahead with this, and NEU is one of these. In spite of there not being legislation on it, kind of trying to push it themselves, and so definitely worth linking up there. We are also working. Yeah, I mean, yes. It's not relevant to say. Joe.
Yeah, I just as well as thinking about case examples of great work that Green Reps are doing, I wonder about, I'm currently writing a paper, a really exciting academic paper, but thinking about how Learning Reps and Green Reps have tried to, well, the language I'm using, build legitimacy for what they're doing in the workplace. And I just wondered whether there's also, because one of the problems of talking about the great things that people are doing is the government could turn around and say, well, if you're doing all these great things, why do you need it legislating? And I say this in terms of, because I'm old enough to have been around when the case for Learning Reps was kind of put together. And maybe there's also a bit of a narrative about the things that Green Reps could be doing if they had greater facility time, or if there was sort of greater recognition of their role. And I know that's a sort of bit of a hostage to fortune to seem, you know, you need both. You need to inspire in terms of what can be done, but also I think counter that with a little bit in terms of what are the barriers and, you know, where things have changed. And I just wondered whether it might be worth, rather than, because I haven't finished writing it yet, rather than writing a sort of a summary of a really dry academic paper, whether, if you think it would be helpful to maybe just to do like a brief, maybe like a research briefing on Green Reps, maybe just a couple of pages. I don't know, it's just sort of bubbled in my mind that to sort of have this balance of good and challenge, you know, successes and challenges.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be helpful, and what if we did, what would people do with it?
I mean, I think that would be really helpful. You're right in a way. It would be, yeah, it's a different product than academic paper that is likely to be most useful here. I think that would be helpful for the individual unions already engaged in this, but it also might be helpful from the TC, to be honest, because we're all trying to make this a priority area, or an area that we are funding over at least next year, so that we can assist with that, and that would be a really valuable thing to have to help with that that drive. So yeah, maybe we can pick that up after this, but yeah, I think yes, that would be really helpful. Martin, did you want to?
Yeah, just from my perspective, I think it would be really helpful for us to build in the case, because I mean, a research paper can take a quite long time, as like you say, you know, so having something that we can start building on and building that momentum towards, and then it might help other people then to contribute into your project and raise the profile of the work that you're doing, so that might then help, because people are building up case studies as well that could help into that research piece.
Definitely. Thanks. Okay, so well, that's all good. So we'll keep developing this and loop you in and take take that stuff into account. That's really helpful. I've just seen your comment in the chat, Dave. Yes, quite yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, that is quite possible. Yeah, so that's an important thing to bear in mind, that yes, we do, or at least a number of affiliated unions, not all unions, obviously, do have that route into what is now government rather than just a political party now. And so yeah, that's an additional route by which we could try and win these things. Okay, well, I'll put together a working group meeting, and we'll maybe hash this out in a bit more detail then, and see where we can get to with this. It's also worth saying that we this isn't been done in isolation. There's a lot more work going on, and there's a lot of scope for. We're sort of in a way we're behaving as if we do have rep rights in the course that we're putting on shortly, which is going to be a lot more in next week, actually, which is going to be quite action orientated and kind of winning those, but also using that to make a real difference in workplaces. And with other pieces that we're doing, we're demonstrating what could be possible, and then the sort of logic is, well, if we had rights, well, look, this could happen in every workplace, not just the select few that we get to operate in. Okay, I'll move on to the next bit, but thanks for your feedback there. I think, I mean, that particular topic is one that we thought would be a good one for a sort of working group for a splinter here. But there are potentially other things that that we could do to kind of give us slightly more of a purpose in this network than a kind of general discussion and knowledge sharing piece. You know, particular projects that TUC could support you to engage in, or that could, you know, we could jointly engage in. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but are there any particular things, particular events, resources, campaigns, whatever else that we might want to think about this network supporting or developing over the next period of time? I think, Joe, that's a legacy hand, is it? Okay, I'll leave it out there. If anyone does have any thoughts about what this could be useful for. The actual membership of this group is nearing 80 people now from across North East Yorkshire and Humber. So although they may not all be here right now, they do get back in touch with me on emails, and we, you know, I'm working with a large number of people, and so the kind of potential for, you know, for this group and for the expertise in there is obviously fairly large now, which is great, and so I think we can galvanize that a little bit. I move on to the next bit, which is kind of related, I guess. This network has been developing for a year now, I think, and so we've met various times, and we've, you know, it's been a kind of conduit by which we can connect people together, and the TC can advance our work, or, you know, work collectively with individuals. But I wonder what else it can do. We've kind of profiled, we've got into this kind of format now where we tend to hear from a couple of experts or campaigns or people talking about particular topics, and then kind of deal with more business oriented stuff afterwards. And then obviously it's a forum for giving announcements and sharing information. Is there anything else that that you would like us to be doing in this forum, or that you feel like this forum could benefit from starting to do? Again, I'm conscious I'm putting you on the spot, but and people have different experiences of being in it. But is there anything else that we should be doing, or any new format that we should be adopting? Debbie, is that our hand?
Everything's in different places on Teams. I'm sticking things in the chat because I'm putting them in my branch report. Yeah. And I'm happy to share that as well. So, and the PCS thing, I hadn't clicked to make it appear, but that's in the chat. The GKN workers, you know, sharing progress that they're making and so on. And something I picked up somewhere recently in view of what Keir Starmer's talking about, there is a petition about a public information campaign around climate. I think I got that from Stuart, actually, Catherine. But I don't know if it's helpful for us to share a bit more of what we're doing in our different branches and groups.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. We don't. That's actually sort of fallen off the agenda, but it shouldn't have done. Yes, I think that's a valuable thing for us to do. So do more of a roundtable on this in the future. We can do that now if that's a helpful thing, but it can also go on the sort of fixed agenda into the future. So we can start learning from each other and supporting that piece. Okay, well, sorry, Catherine, are you?
Did you want a contribution? Yeah, shall I say the West Yorkshire Eco-Educators in collaboration last week with the Ministry of Eco-Education, which is sort of not-for-profit organisation funded by Dale Vince from the Ecotricity. So he gives them some funding. But we put on an event at the Hepworth. We had over 50 educators there, which is great, during the day, which is even better. And we had you know, little tiny sort of 10, 15, 20-minute inputs from about 15 people, and it was a really good sort of experience. So it was a good moving on for people to understand that education workers and you know, teachers and educators need to be doing more on the climate, and it was a really energizing experience. So we'll build on from that, but it was a very positive thing. We didn't do lots and lots of trade union issues on that day. I did talk about union action and the Green Reps and heat action and things. You know, I did do those and things, but a lot of it was curriculum. But it saw that there was potential for doing it, and we need to do many more things. And Stuart Strathtree, who's just wonderful on doing stuff, was there doing about what he's done at Greenhead, which is also fabulous as well. Thank you.
That's brilliant, thanks. So this, well, let's do that. Let's move on to both announcements, but also workplace or other organising updates. So Ellen, if you go next.
Sorry about that. I think most people already know what I'm about to say, but it's a meeting that's being organised by people in the Campaign Against Climate Change trade union group and other individuals in the Greener Jobs Alliance and various unions, particularly the unions that got through Composite 18 at the TUC, which is has a lot of positive demands around union climate action, one of which is to have a year of union climate action probably starting. I've got a feeling that NEU is already discussing beginning that next September. Is that right? I'm not sure where we are with that, but the meeting is it's a Zoom meeting for people to sort of share, you know, what they think could be part of a trade union year of action and how we can generally take forward the kind of aspirations that are expressed in that motion that was passed. So that's next Wednesday, and I'll just
excellent.
Already got it, but here's the link.
Thanks. Yeah, 27. Yeah, next Wednesday, right? Yeah, 27th. Yes, that's great. I will share details of that. It is it is the case that individual unions are already thinking about this. I know Unison are thinking about 2026 as the year of green action. And yeah, NEU are maybe already on that line, but it would be a bit of a missed opportunity if we weren't aligning unions working on this. There's also some potential for the TUC at a national level to sort of try and bring some of this stuff together or do a conference, but early days. So we'll see how it progresses. But yeah, I'll definitely put that event in the details. Dave, we'll come to you. Dave, are you able to unmute? Well, I can do it if.
Sorry, I thought I'd press the unmute button. Yeah, sorry, just on Ellen's point, I wonder if it'd be possible to circulate that composite 18 so we can see exactly what was agreed and push, you know, in our own unions around some of the things that were in it.
Yeah, I'll include them in the mail out that goes, just so we know what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Just in terms of activity, I've not got a lot to report, but wearing my councillor hat, I sit on the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, which basically is a jointly owned, jointly local authority owned company. It's a proper business which buys in goods to supply primarily schools in the region, and actually, frankly, in much of the northwest as well. And I've been pushing to try and get them to get the Scope 3 emissions identified in all the products that they're buying. And obviously in the information we supply to schools and to local authorities on the goods that are being provided through it. If it's quite challenging for them, to be fair, but they are working towards that. Although it's quite difficult given the thousands of items that they purchase. But I thought I'd just mention that because particularly for the NEU, if individual schools use Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, if the schools press the company as well, then perhaps we might accelerate that process.
And YPO is based largely in Wakefield, so we don't really do very many conversations. We have had conversations with, so I will take that in as well. Scope 3, thank you.
Thanks. That's I didn't know that such a body existed. That's quite interesting. It's those kind of administrative battles that will lead to will kind of domino on and result in actual change further down the line. So that's great. Thanks, Dave. Joe?
Dave, could I just ask in relation to purchasing, sorry if this is a nerdy question that I'm not quite even sure how to express it, but I understand that procurement rules for local authorities have changed as new legislation last year, giving them more discrepancy, if that's the right word, discretion, I think perhaps the better word, to give preference to local suppliers. Is that true, and what does that mean for you guys?
Yes, the government has, the last government has legislated. It's not yet implemented, and the implementation has been slightly delayed because as part of the legislation, the government's allowed to use secondary legislation to publish a document in terms of, I think, the strategy. I'm sorry, I'm a bit rusty on it. I need to go back to the papers. And the new government has held that back so that in effect it can redo that particular document more in line with its, its manifesto rather than the previous government's. But that's likely to be in place, issued, and the new rules in place for the start of the next financial year. in April. It certainly does change. It frees up purchasing in some respects, but actually it also requires public bodies and local authorities to be even more rigorous and bureaucratic about what they do. So it's actually got significant extra costs for local councils. We're obviously waiting the final publication of the rules to see the exact detail and implications.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'll see if I can get you a better briefing than that. But that's the best I can do off the top of my head.
Thanks, Dave. No, I'm sure that's helpful.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go. Apologies.
That's fine. Well, I'm conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left. So do you mind if we just hear from Debbie, and then I'll just rattle through some other announcements, and then we'll close.
Okay, I don't have a workplace to report about, but a couple of local things from York Trades Council, that we have got quite a lot of representation now on the York Climate Commission. I go to economy, education and health working groups, and I would say the most active one at the moment is the education group, and planning a schools climate conference. It doesn't cover FE and HE, but planning a schools climate conference next summer. So already starting to plan for that. So maybe I can put Catherine in touch for, ideas, speakers. I think they're pretty strong on that. And then we have the Unison Green Rep putting in FOI requests. Help me out, Sam. It's around the council's money, isn't it? And whether it's the pension fund, I think, being partly, she's doing it on behalf of the Palestine Assembly to find out about Israel, links with Israel, and also well, it must be climate stuff. So, I mean, I think there's other actions beyond workplace actions to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. No, that's great. And yeah, it's great to hear of what's going on there. And the Trades Council's links with the York Climate Commission are, I think, really valuable. So it's great to see that. We'll just move on. So because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'll just report back that the TUC's workshop program, Green Organising Workshop Program that we're calling Leveraging Green, has now been released in full. So we have that program. The first session has already happened. It went well. The others will be online. The next one is the 3rd of December, which Joe is leading or partly leading. Which is fantastic. Yeah, I'll circulate the details for people to sign up on that one. That one's about winning just transitions, lessons learned from battles that are already happening abroad and in the UK. But there's a whole suite of these. There's 4 additional sessions over between now and April that people can sign up to. So I'll circulate the details and maybe you can pass it on. That would be really appreciated. I've already referred to the winning a worker-led plan for green steel piece on the 4th of December. So if anyone is over in Hull, that would be great, or has contacts there. More people involved in that, the better. So that's that free community dinner and discussion on green steel. Fuel Poverty Action is holding one of its Fuel for Thought sessions tomorrow at 6:30. This is on renters' rights and to sort of safe and warm and in control of their homes. But actually, this is a series that they've been running. I think this is the 12th or 13th one of these sessions that they've been running, and they're actually really valuable. And so I think we it's good to be aware of them going forward. Workers for Energy for All and Heat Strike are collaborating for an online event on the 26th of November at 7:30. It's about organising during extreme weather, including extreme cold now, and not only heat, in a kind of positive sense, strike. I'll circulate the details of that campaign against climate change trade union group event. I'll also circulate the details of the eco-socialism conference coming up in a couple of weeks. And as always, the Greener Jobs Alliance newsletter details I'll circulate around as well. I don't think I have any other particular announcements. Does anyone else have any to add before we close? Nope, cool. In which case I will close that off. Thank you for coming. And as always, it's available online as well. But yeah, thank you very much for attending. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.